If there was a trial, Jim Bamford might have testified at the trial of Thomas Drake, an NSA whistleblower. Stay with us.
You have understood the rivers of the ages. Yes, and you have understood the universal mind. You have placed your footprints on the everlasting sand of time. Yeah, so tell me why can't you understand that there ain't no such thing as a Superman? There ain't no such thing as a Superman. You was on the Nile, you went to see great Egypt fall, it fell down to the ground. Yes, and you was out there on the corner.
Late, great Gil Scott-Heron here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
Yesterday, Democratic Congressman Hank Johnson of Georgia questioned NSA Director and Cybercom Commander General Keith Alexander about reports that the NSA is intercepting U.S. citizens' phone calls and emails. Johnson specifically refers to your article, Jim Bamford. Let's go to that clip.
The general article in Wired magazine reported this month that a whistleblower formerly employed by the NSA has stated NSA signals intercepts include, quote, eavesdropping on domestic phone calls and inspection of domestic emails, end quote. Is that true?
No, not in that context. The question that, or I think what he's trying to raise is, are we gathering all the information on the United States? No, that is not correct.
The author of the Wired magazine article, his name is James Bamford. He writes that NSA has software that, quote, searches U.S. sources for target addresses, locations, countries, and phone numbers, as well as watch-listed names, keywords, and phrases in email. Any communication that arouses suspicion, especially those to or from the million or so people on the agency watch lists, are automatically copied or recorded and then transmitted to the NSA. Is this true?
No, it's not.
That was NSA Director General Keith Alexander being questioned by Georgia Congressman Hank Johnson. James Bamford, your response.
Well, you know, the NSA is constantly denied that they're doing things, and then it turns out they are doing these things. They denied they were doing domestic eavesdropping back in the 70s, and it turned out they had Operation Shamrock and Operation Minaret, and they've been reading every single telegram coming in or going out of the country for 30 years at that point, and also eavesdropping on anti-war veterans. That came out during the Church Committee report. More recently, a few years ago, President Bush said before camera that the United States is not eavesdropping on anybody without a warrant. And then it turns out we had this exposure to all the warrantless eavesdropping in the New York Times article. And so you have this constant denial and parsing of words in terms of what he's saying. So what I would like to do, quote from a number of people in the article that are whistleblowers. They worked at NSA. They worked there many years. One of my key whistleblowers was the senior technical person on the largest eavesdropping operation in NSA. He was a very senior NSA official. He was in charge of basically automating the entire world eavesdropping network for NSA. So, and one of the other people is a intercept operator that was actually listening to these calls, listening to journalists calling from overseas and talking to their wives and having intimate conversations. And she tells about how these people were having these conversations, and she felt very guilty listening to them. These people came forward and said, this shouldn't be happening. Bill Benny, the senior official I interviewed, had been with NSA for 40 years almost, and he left saying that what they're doing is unconstitutional. What I'd like to see is, why don't we have a panel for the first time in history of some of these people and have them before Congress, sitting there telling their story to Congress instead of to me, and then have NSA respond to them. I mean, this is the American public who we're talking about, whose phone calls we're talking about. So, and email and data searches and all that. So, I think it's about time that the Congress get involved instead of asking questions from a newspaper or from a magazine article, and start actually questioning these people on the record in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it and to whom they're doing it. To whom they're doing it.
We're talking to James Bamford, long-time reporter on intelligence activities in this country, has been doing it for more than 30 years, been covering the National Security Agency, a top-secret agency far bigger than the CIA. Jim Bamford, you referred to some of your whistleblowers, and in 2008, I spoke with retired Army Sergeant Adrienne Kinney here on Democracy Now!, who revealed she was personally ordered to eavesdrop on Americans working for news organizations and NGOs in Iraq. Take a listen.
After 9/11, when we were mobilized and given this new mission, it was very starting something from the bottom up, and it was really striking that in intercepting all these satellite phone communications, the majority of the traffic was not Arabic. It was languages beyond our translation capabilities. We would get Chinese, Japanese, Tagalog, Tajik, a lot of Dari, Persian, Pashto, some minimal Arabic, but really not that much. And so we would just go through this process of going through and identifying who belonged to what. And as we began to identify different phone numbers which belong to these humanitarian aid organizations and journalists, we actually had the capability to block those phone numbers from being intercepted, but due to guidance given to our officer in charge, we did not do that.
That was retired Army Sergeant Adrienne Kinney, who was here in the United States eavesdropping on the Palestine Hotel, which was later bombed. She said she saw a piece of paper that showed that the Palestine Hotel was going to be bombed, and went to her superiors and said, "You're bombing the hotel where I am listening to the people inside, and I can tell you that they are journalists." Jim Bamford, you quote Adrienne in your piece as well, in your piece in Wired magazine, called "The NSA is Building the Country's Biggest Spy Center." Watch what you say, Jim.
Yes, I first interviewed Adrienne for my book, The Shadow Factory, a number of years ago, and she's extremely credible, and these are people just like Bill Benny that aren't speaking to me confidentially. They're speaking to me on the record, and they're risking jail, basically, to tell the country what's going on. So these people have a great deal of courage and a great deal of credibility, and that's why I think that the NSA owes them and owes the country a duty to come out and say what they're doing. I mean, this is a democracy, as your program often says, and I think the public should really have at least a fair insight into what the government is doing with their communications.
One of the most extraordinary things about the eavesdropping program is the number of languages that people at the NSA are eavesdropping on. Can you say a little about what kind of linguistic ability the people who are listening in have?
Well, the NSA was always very hurting for linguistic capabilities, especially in the lead-up to 9/11, so they had very few people that spoke Pashtun or Dari, the languages in Afghanistan. They had very much an insufficient number of people who spoke Arabic, and Adrian Kinney was telling me how they had an instructor down in Georgia where she was working for NSA, trying to teach rudimentary Pashtun, I think it was, to some of the people, but it was very hard for them to pick it up. So there's 7,000 languages in the world, and NSA that's one of the very difficult things NSA has. It's trying to understand what people are saying. Picking up the information, intercepting it, is far less difficult than understanding what they're saying.
In response to your article, Jim Bamford, Forbes magazine published a piece yesterday by Lauren Thompson of the Lexing Institute called NSA's Secret Data Center is a Threat, but Only to America's Enemies. The author writes, quote, "The real reason the intelligence community needs big cryptological and analytic complexes is that modern information technology has empowered hostile states and extremists of every stripe, giving them unprecedented access to the sources of American strength, while enabling them to thoroughly obscure the authors and content of their communications." James Bamford, your comment.
Well, listen, I wrote another book called Pretext for War about how we got into the Iraq War, and I've been hearing this fear-mongering forever. We're spending enormous amounts of money on NSA to pick up communications. And even though they lost all these, they had all these failures during the 1990s, failure after failure, the World Trade Center 1 and the World Trade Center 2, the attack on the Cole, the East African embassies bombings, and even after they started all this rebuilding and more money, they still missed the person flying over on the Christmas Day flight to Detroit with a bomb in his underwear, and they missed the person in Times Square. So, all this eavesdropping we're doing and all this money we're spending, I don't see an awful lot of value coming out of that, but I do hear tremendous amounts of fear-mongering, that sort of non-stop fear-mongering from the people that are pushing this agenda.
One of the things that you've raised in the past has to do with the way in which the NSA worked with the telecommunications industry here in the U.S. to eavesdrop on American citizens. But they apparently outsourced the eavesdropping, the relationship between the NSA and the telecommunications companies to a third party. Can you say a little bit about who that third party was, who those companies were, and where they were based?
Yeah, two of the companies that were heavily involved, one of them was Naris. It was a company that has been since bought by Boeing. It was a company formed in Israel by Israelis, and then it ran its company from California, but the NSA, or I guess it was AT&T that basically hired them, and or NSA, maybe the two of them working together, but the bottom line was Naris provided the equipment that NSA was using in the AT&T facilities. AT&T had this big switch in San Francisco, and it would be using this Naris equipment that would take the information from the wires coming in, the cables coming in, and then route it to NSA, the information that NSA wanted. So it used this company called Naris, and again, it's a company that had been formed overseas, and you really have to start wondering when you have companies that were formed in foreign countries, and they're giving such intimate access to U.S. telecommunications, especially very secret U.S. work. The other company was Verint, and they do a lot of the monitoring for Verizon. And Verint also was formed in Israel by Israelis. And it turns out that the chairman and founder of the company ended up being a fugitive now from the United States, wanting on multiple counts of fraud and theft and so forth. He's hiding out in Namibia and Africa now. And then two other members of the General Counsel